We're up to chapter 7, verse 8. Vayushavas Moshe ves Aaron el Paro. So Moshe and Aaron returned to Pharaoh. Vayomer aleim. And Pharaoh said to them, Pharaoh said to Moshe and Aaron, go and serve God. Just tell us who's going to go. He said, go. Go and serve Hashem your God. Mi v'mi ha'olchem. Who are the ones who are going? Moshe and Aaron return, Rashi says, Hushvu al yedei shliach. They were brought back by a messenger. Sheshochu achareim ve'eshivum el paro. The Egyptians brought them back to Pharaoh. Oh, wait, I'm reading the wrong, I'm not in the right place. I don't know why I'm in the totally wrong place. Chapter 7, verse 8. I love the next pasuk so much. Moshe says, we're going to go with our young and our old, with our sheep and our cattle. Yeah, we're up to chapter 7, verse 8. I was in the wrong place. Chapter 7, verse 8. So it says, Vayomer Hashem al Moshe ve'al Aaron lemor. God said to Moshe and Aaron, saying, Ki yidaber alechem paro lemor. And he said, when Paro will speak to you and say, Tinu lachem mofet, give to you a sign, v'amarta al Aaron, you shall say to Aaron, Pachas matcha, take your staff, v'ashleich lifnei Paro, throw it down before Paro, yell at Tanin, let it become a serpent. Now, let's see actually what a Tanin is. This is a little bit of a tricky one, even though we're only really supposed to study Rashi in this context, in this study. It's impossible to read this verse without thinking that there might be an issue. Because it says, he said, speak to Paro and say, give us a sign. When Paro will say, give us a sign, mofet is oath, a sign to prove that sheyesh tzorach b'mi shesholech atchem. Or it's hard to fit into the literal words of Rashi, but clear what he's saying is, prove to me that your God is powerful. So he says, when that happens, you should say to Aaron, take your staff, throw it before Paro and be a Tanin. What is this Tanin? So Rashi says, the Tanin is a Nachash. Rashi says the Tanin is a snake, which is strange, challenging for two reasons. One reason is because Tanin elsewhere does not mean a snake. Elsewhere, Tanin means a giant sea creature or else a crocodile. Elsewhere means a giant sea creature or a crocodile. But Rashi here is telling us that it means a snake. So, if that's the case, if it means a snake, why doesn't it say a snake? Because earlier in this story, we know just a few chapters earlier, Moshe says, God says to Moshe, take your staff and throw it on the ground. And what happens? He says in chapter 4, it says that God told Moshe, take your staff and throw it on the ground, and it was a nachash. And it became a nachash. So earlier in chapter 4, Moshe's staff became a nachash. There it uses the word nachash. So why is it changed from a nachash to a tanin here? Rashi doesn't tell us that. And it's a very tricky question. Why does it not change? Why does the Torah change? If Rashi is saying this is the same thing as a nachash, why is it using a different word? So that's why other commentaries say this is not a nachash, but it's a tanin. What's a tanin? If elsewhere in the Torah, tanin means a giant sea creature, it's hard to imagine that they threw down a staff and it turned into a giant sea creature. First of all, a sea creature can't survive on land. And second of all, how does a staff turn into something giant? That's why some want to say that it's a crocodile. That seems to be the most common explanation here. That's not a snake, but a crocodile. Yes, Rabbi Yosef.
Modern Hebrew is crocodile, like you said, but maybe the circumstances changed because for Moshe himself in the desert, it's only him. It can turn into a nachash, but when Hashem knew that the Hartumim in the next verse are going to in 2 verses are going to do it, then that's why he made it into a larger creature to be able to show Hashem's power that he's able to eat and swallow theirs, like to impress him even more than what Moshe had needed for himself.
Meaning a larger snake.
Yeah,
you're saying there's 2 types of snakes. One is larger than the other. Okay,
or crocodile, like you said. But I'm just saying that it was to show Hashem's power, because Hashem knew that the others are going to do the same thing. So,
but the problem is that Rashi says specifically it's a nachash, which is the exact same word as earlier, when clearly the text is drawing a distinction. So it's a tricky passage. We'll just look briefly. The Onkelos, the Targum Onkelos, does not say it's a nachash. He says it's a tanina. He says it's he doesn't say it's a nachash. He says it's a tanina. Okay. Vayavo Moshe v'Aaron el Paro, and Moses and Aaron came to Paro. Vayasu Cain kasher tziva Hashem. And Moshe and Aaron came to Paro, and they did that just like God commanded. And he threw it down before Aaron, before Pharaoh, and before his servants, and it became a Tanin. So, so Pharaoh called his wise men and his magicians, and they also, with their sorcery, did this, and their enchantings and their charms. Rashi says, Bilach HaShehom, with their incantations. Interestingly enough, Rashi says, this is what's called a word that has no comparison. It has no comparable word. Bilatehen. The only word Rashi says that's similar is There's similar, the closest word is when there was the Keruvim, when there were the Keruvim who were standing outside the Garden of Eden. And there was a revolving sword around it, where they were standing outside the Garden of Eden, and there was the Charav HaMitapechet, and there was a Lahat, the incantation. And that sword was revolving through the Lahat, through the incantation. But there, Rashi doesn't say it was an incantation. He says it was just a blade. So it's not the same word, Rashi says, even though you could say it, possibly, he says. I once saw an explanation which makes a lot of sense to me, which is, who are these necromancers and sorcerers? That there was an ancient Egyptian technique of taking a snake and charming it to make it completely still so that it looked like a staff. And then you threw it on the ground and it started slithering. That this was an ancient magic trick. Maybe if you YouTube it, you'll see somebody who could do that to a snake. And that's possibly why we have all these magicians here. They thought, okay, that's what Moshe's doing. He's just a magician. So anyway, did anybody ever hear that? Nobody else ever heard that, Jeff? You never heard it?
It's not chover chaver.
What?
I'm not wearing my glasses, but I think that the Torah says that we're not allowed to do it in the commandment of chover chaver, which is that incantation. That's how Rashi explains it. I think. About the animals. So like, and
No, I
Shlomo,
didn't say we're allowed to do it. I'm just saying that's what I think the Egyptians were doing.
yeah. So in the context of Shlomo Melech's throne, it was that there was lions that looked like they were just armrests, and people either knew or assumed that these were real lions, and that Shlomo can make them like become live. Uh, anyway, I'll look into it, and I'll send you a text.
Okay, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that. So now we go to the next verse. And each one threw their staff. Taninim, and they became the Taninim. And Aaron saw staff swallowed theirs. Rashi makes the miracle even greater. He says, after it became, after it returned to being a staff, and it swallowed them all. Because it doesn't say the staff, because since it says the staff swallowed, which is more than the serpent swallowed, this implies that it was the staff doing the swallowing and not the serpent. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened. He did not listen to them, like God spoke. And God said to Moshe, he said, Pharaoh's heart is heavy. He refuses to send away the people. Rashi says, Kaved, Targumo Yakir, it's heavy. Velo is Yakar, because it's an adjective. Okay. Meaning it is heavy, not became heavy. Okay. Vayomer Hashem Moshe, Kaved Paro. So now we start to the first plague. Lecha Paro Baboker. But actually, I want to skip now, because if those of you who attended our Monday shiur, we did actually through the fourth plague. So I want to now skip to the fifth plague. So we're going to go to chapter 9, verse 1 now. Chapter 9, verse 1. Vayomer Hashem Moshe. God spoke to Moshe. Boel Paro, go speak to Pharaoh. V'dibarte lav, go say to him. Komar Hashem Elkei Avrim. This is what God, the God of the Hebrews, says. Shalach hasami v'yamduni. Send my people, let them go. Ki ma'ina tal shaleach v'onacham achazik bam. If you are refusing to send them, and you're still holding them. Rashi here is ironic. Rashi says machazik bam means to hold them. And Rashi proves it by citing a verse from Deuteronomy, which talks about when a woman embarrasses a man by hachazika b'mfushav, as part of a fight, she grabs a hold of the man's privates. So I guess Rashi puts that in. It's telling us Hashem and the Moshe and the Bnei Yisrael, they're really putting a hold on Pharaoh, so to speak. That's why it's the same word. It reminds us of that scene where the person who has lesser strength at first glance, i.e. Bnei Yisrael, or in that case the woman, grabs a hold of a person in their sensitive area and thereby gets them to do what they want. He says, hey, oh, Bill, how are you doing? He says, Hine, what are you looking for? Oh, thank you. He says, Hine Yad Hashem, Hoya b'miknecha, or chapter 9, verse 3. He says, the hand of God is Hoya, will be present on your cattle. Asher b'sadeh, in the field. Vasusim b'chamorim, the horses, the donkeys, b'gmalim, the camels, b'bakar, the flock, u'batzon, the sheep, dever kavein ma'od. Very great pestilence. So this, now we're up to the 5th plague. Ve'efor Hashem b'miknei Yisrael b'miknei Mitzrayim. And Hashem will make a tremendous, Hefa is a tremendous sign. God will make a tremendous sign between the cattle of Israel and the cattle of Egypt. V'lo yamus mikol b'nei Yisrael davar. So the cattle of the Egyptians will die, but not the cattle of the Jewish people. Rashi says hifla is to distinguish, hifdil. That's what he means. I mistranslated it. I said hifla is a sign, but really it means to distinguish. Vayasem Hashem moed lemor. And not only that, Hashem will set a time. Now, moed in the rest of the Bible can mean holiday, but here Rashi says it means a time. Machar yasa Hashem hadavar zeh ba'aretz. Tomorrow, God will do this in the land. Vayas Hashem es hadavar, and God made this. Vayas Hashem es hadavar zeh mimacharas. So God did this thing. The plague is dever, but God did this thing. Davar zeh mimacharas. The next day. Vayamas kol miknei Mitzrayim, u'mimignei b'nei Yisrael u'meis echad. Hello, Ezra. How are we doing today? Baruch Hashem. So all of the flock of Egypt died, and from the flock of the children of Israel, not even one died. Let's see what Rashi says. Nothing there. Vayishlach Paro v'hinei lo meis b'mignei Yisrael ad echad. How are you doing, Eliezer?
Great.
So Pharaoh sent forth his hand, and not one of the cattle of the Jews died. Page, I don't know exactly the page. It's chapter 9, verse 7. Do you have the page, Bill?
326.
326. And it's true, not one died. And so, okay, we've seen now 5 plagues: blood, frogs, lice, arrows, which is the mixed multitude of animals, and now we've just seen the plague on the Egyptian. That's called, we usually call it dever, but here it is called davar in the Torah. So that's just something to be aware of. Now we're up to the 6th plague. The 6th plague is Vayomer Hashem al Moshe ve'al Aaron. God says to Moses and Aaron, "Techu lachem melo chafnechem." Take for yourselves a handful of soot. Rashi says furnace soot. Davar ani pachman hagechalim, something which blows away from coals. When you have coals, what blows away from them? It's called soot. And in French, it's called ulvi. Ulvi. Some read it as not ulvis, but pulvis, which means like pulverize. So take this handful of like powder, uzirako, and uzirako Moshe, and throw it towards the heaven. Zirako Moshe Hashemayim Elinei Pharaoh. Take the handful of powder in your hands and throw it up to the sky in the eyes of Paro. Hello there, Moshe. Vaya. So Rashi says this, we're 323, Moshe. Rashi says there were many miracles here because kol davar nizrach bekoach, eino nizrach ela biyad achas. That typically speaking, when you throw something with force, you throw it with one hand. But in this case, Moshe took it in his hands, as in both of his hands. So that was one miracle. That normally you throw something farther when you throw with one hand than with two hands. Here he threw with two hands. And number two, that the dust went all over the land of the soot went all over the land of Egypt. It spread everywhere. This is like, what was it? A couple of years ago, there was all this smog coming down from Canada or something. There was gray stuff on the cars. Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember that, Moshe?
Forest fire right there.
Yeah, there was a forest fire in Canada, and we were getting the soot.
So on 9/11, when the towers came down, the people who were in the vicinity were covered in ash. They were absolutely, it was absolutely biblical.
I was there. I was there in the morning of September 12th, and everything I had to be thrown out. It was covered.
With white shirts, completely white.
Yeah. It was white. And you know what it was? It was human remains. That was human remains. So then we said, some of it was just the buildings which were incinerated. It'll be dust on all the land. And it'll be dust on the land, and it'll be a man and animal for boils, bubbling up throughout the land of Egypt. Rashi says, as a boil spreading blisters, for through it, the blisters develop on them. So this was the plague of boils. Has anybody here ever seen boils on a person?
Not good.
I don't know. I mean, maybe it's like shingles. Is that what it is? Is that what this plague is? Shingles? What?
It's like blisters. Visual. I think
Blisters aren't painful. I mean, if you're on your foot, it's painful to walk, but they're not themselves like this burning itching, which you get from like a shingles or like a chicken pox. So, I mean, blisters are painful to walk on, but they're usually after the burn is starting to heal, I think, I don't know.
it's not good, whatever.
No, I mean, what? We could ask Dr. Brazen on Shabbos. Kobe, let's go. A big mazel tov to you on your job, Kobe. When do you start?
Like 2 weeks ago.
Beautiful. I'm so proud of you. So, Vayekluas piach. Okay, Shlin, Rashi says it's an expression of heat. Oh, there's similar words in the Mishnah. Rashi compares this to a Mishnah Hebrew called a Shanash Sunah. That's where the Gemara discusses what the Kohen Gadol would pray for, a hot year before he left the temple. Okay. And they took this, what did he say, soot? I was saying it's soot, so it's soot. Vayamdu if they paro, they stood before Paro. Vayizrokoto Moshe Shemaima, Moshe threw it to the sky. Vayishlin ababut poreach badam beima. Let's just stop for a moment and say, Rashi asked the question, they threw up the soot, and it was boils on all the man and the animals, but where are the animals? Didn't the animals just die? Where are the animals coming from? Rashi asked that question. If you're going to ask where they have animals, didn't it say all the livestock of Egypt died? So we say that the earlier plague was only on the animals in the fields. But now he brought the livestock into his houses. So this is affecting those Egyptians who had took the livestock into their houses. And the same question is, where did Paro get the horses to lead his chariots? I had another question. Hey, John, how you doing? I had another question which I want to put out to everybody, which is, what's the significance of this plague? Why is, of all the things, it seems so random, of all the things to visit about the Egyptians, it's the boils. Why is that the plague that God gives to the Egyptians? I understand the plagues that come from the Nile, and the ground. The Nile was the Egyptian central nerve, the source of their economy, which they worshipped. The frogs coming out of there, they're attacked from there. The lice coming from the earth, which the Jewish people had to work. The mixed multitude, because the Egyptians, they were attacked by that. The Egyptians were not letting the Jewish people live in their society, so they were attacked by all the animals coming together. I understand why their livestock dies, but what is the symbolism of this plague? Yes, Bill.
One is that could be that you can't escape it, you can't run away from it. Another is that it's intrinsic to who you are. It's on your very skin. It's part of your very being.
Joe, but in English, it boils. That's what he's mentioning. The English is here saying English where she used because it doesn't kill you.
But it's painful.
Cause them a lot of discomfort and so.
Yeah, I think that Bill is right. I think it goes also to the fact that the Egyptians treated the Jewish people like subhuman, like they afflicted their bodies and made them feel just tremendous torture. And this is how they were punished then. Okay, let us stop here to daven at this time. Shekoyach to everybody.